Meanwhile, after the Justice Department missed House Democrats' Tuesday deadline to hand over the Mueller report, the House Judiciary Committee voted to authorize Chairman Jerry Nadler to issue a subpoena for the full report and all of the underlying evidence. But Nadler said he wants to give Attorney General William Barr, quote, time to change his mind about redacting the report before submitting it to Congress.
We're going to work with the Attorney General and for a short period of time in the hope that he will reveal to us the entire Mueller report. But if that doesn't work out in a very short order, we will issue the subpoenas.
Are you willing to do that as soon as this week to serve the Justice Department?
I'm just going to say very short order. Beyond, I can't say how many days.
You don't want to see the unredacted report?
No, that's the whole point. I don't need to see the grand jury testimony. I don't have this paranoia that my friends on the left have, that the conclusions are really not what they are.
You made reference to the Mueller report. Have you seen it? Because we haven't.
No, I've seen the principal findings from the Attorney General.
Bob Mueller has provided his findings to the Attorney General, who has accurately summarized those. These investigations should end. We should move on.
What basically we're doing here is, in my opinion, the Democrats are asking Attorney General Barr to violate the law.
The Attorney General is doing exactly what he said he would be doing, making as much of the report public as possible under federal law and departmental policy. What's the rush? Spring break, probably.
All right, let's go to Jake. Tell me, you're reporting on this. I just wonder what William Barr would have to gain by completely misleading the American people. So I'm just wondering, should his summary be given more benefit of the doubt, or does the Times reporting suggest a real conflict here?
Well, the Times reporting it's funny. The last couple of days on Capitol Hill in conversations with members of Congress, one thing has come up constantly. If Barr's letter was so misrepresentative, why weren't the Mueller people complaining about it? And then these two stories dropped last night with the Mueller people complaining about it. So I found that fascinating. A few things to me seem abundantly clear. Democrats are going to, within, I would assume, days, send the subpoena to the Justice Department for this report. They have already authorized this subpoena, and the window of time is going to shrink, but their patience is going to shrink quite quickly. That's number one. Number two, this issue is not going away on Capitol Hill at any point soon. I think there's going to be more subpoenas flying, more invitations for testimony, more hand-wringing over this, and I think, let's zoom out even more. Over the last 24 hours, we've seen the Ways and Means Committee issue a request for Trump's tax returns. We've seen other committees issue requests for Trump's financial information going back decades. We have the Washington Post reporting that Jared Kushner might have been subject to foreign influence, and that's why his security clearance was at risk. I mean, this has suddenly turned into a very, very perilous 24 to 48 hours for this president when it comes to his relationship with Capitol Hill and the investigations on Capitol Hill, which are frankly, just revving up.
So, Elise Jordan, what's the politics of this? You hear Republicans there saying we've seen enough of the report. We've seen the Attorney General's version of it.
I think Trump won first round on this. I think he won the first round. I think that what we are hearing from on background, it's sourced, but without unidentified sources and how they're upset, that is what the Mueller investigators feel, and they want more information because they know that the first draft of history has been set, and it's very difficult to walk back that narrative once Donald Trump has by his handpicked attorney general been seemingly exonerated, even though he of course was not. And that was literally the one quote from the Mueller investigation that was included in the 4-page
There were
letter.
very few quotes in the Attorney General's. I mean, and apparently, if the reporting is correct, no reason to question it at this point. But there are summaries that the Mueller investigators, they could have used those summaries. They tried to give usable summaries so that the entire report didn't have to be released. It's definitely, we would like to see the report. Everybody would.
And I don't know how anyone can make a plausible case against seeing the report. We all want to see the full report, and the Attorney General says he'll release the full report. It's a question of what report do you see? What are the redactions in there? And I think there are appropriate redactions. There's classified material, there's grand jury testimony, there are all kinds of things that the public doesn't and probably probably shouldn't see.
I'm confused on, was there any kind of conversation? It seems like there wasn't, based on Michael Schmidt's reporting, about what was going to be the rollout of the findings.
Well, look, to put a little perspective on it, we're all kind of flying blind. We're talking about a report that
we haven't seen.
Well over 300 pages, which was boiled down to maybe 2 sentence fragments, Richard, in the Attorney General's release.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, look, this is, it's frustrating, it's bizarre. On one level, we should all hold off, because there's no report to look at. On the other hand, the temptation to talk about it is obviously great, given how significant it is. But I think Elisa's point is the critical point. No matter what comes out, a lot of people have already reached their conclusion. The Democrats have to be careful here, and others. It doesn't look almost like they're sore losers, that they're keeping a story alive, that people are ready to move on. And I think that's what the politics, again, work in the president's favor.
Well, curiosity aside, Juan Zarate, from a national security perspective, why would we want to see the report?
Well, it's a great question, Mika, because I think one of the things that Robert Mueller was doing was looking at and building the case around Russian influence in the U.S. election. And so it wasn't just a question of whether or not the president or the campaign was colluding. That was a critical criminal inquiry. But the broader question of what Russian influence looked like, how they built their campaign in 2016, what the agents look like, their methodology, all of that is exactly what Robert Mueller began to expose. You remember the very first set of indictments that came from the special prosecutor, special investigator, had to do with the Russians themselves. So he was laying the predicate to explain to the American public, to explain for purposes of this investigation, what it is that the Russians were trying to do, how they were doing it. I think the lingering question for me here, and I've said all along, Mika, that what we've needed from Robert Mueller has been credibility, clarity, and closure. We haven't gotten all of that yet. The clarity will come, I think, with the release of the report, redacted, as it will be. The closure's not yet there, but one of the interesting questions from a national security perspective is, what degree of influence and leverage have the Russians had over not just the president, but over the American political system? What have they done? And I think that's the lingering question here, because others, like the Chinese, the Iranians, are looking at this. They're reading the playbook, and no doubt they're going to try to influence and divide the country the way the Russians did.
Well, it's happening.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.